I accidentally discovered that my sister-in-law was cheating on my brother with another man through my nephew's tablet. She threatened to ruin my life if I exposed her. I am a 27-year-old woman, and I have an older brother, David, 33, who is currently married to Suzanne, 35. David and Suzanne have been together for the past 12 years and got married last year. Their relationship was the typical story of coworkers who eventually fall in love. They both worked at the same company until David was recently offered a much better position at another company. I have always had a cordial relationship with Suzanne. I don't like her very much, as I always felt something wasn't right with her. Despite my feelings, I never tried to interfere in their relationship. Nor did I discourage my brother when he told me he was going to marry her. Now, back to the story, we all gathered at our parents' house to celebrate Thanksgiving together. We live in different cities, so it's nice to see each other after a long time. I arrived before David and Suzanne, as I took 2 extra days off from work so I could spend more time with my parents. David and Suzanne arrived later and were warmly greeted by us. When I hugged my brother, I noticed he wasn't as friendly as usual and couldn't even smile properly. He had dark circles under his eyes and looked like he hadn't slept for a long time. He greeted us timidly and went upstairs with his luggage. I was worried about him, but I didn't want to say anything in front of everyone. I whispered to Suzanne if anything happened to him, and she just shrugged, saying they had a long trip. I nodded and hugged my nephew, Daniel, who was now 11 years old and seemed to be growing up very fast. During Thanksgiving dinner, my brother barely interacted with us, even when Mom brought out his favorite pumpkin pudding. At this point, my parents started to worry too. After dinner, I was washing the utensils when my nephew came to talk to me. He excitedly told me how he'd found a new game he loved to play. We always talked about games, so I asked him what it was. Daniel told me that when I finished my work, he would show me the game on his tablet. I was surprised to hear that he had a tablet of his own and asked him about it. He told me that Susan had given him her old tablet when she got a new one at work. He went on to tell me how he loved playing all those different games, and I laughed at his excitement. I finished the last of the dishes, dried my hands, and followed him to his room, where he showed me the game and tried to convince me to download it on my tablet as well, so could play together. His cheerful spirit was contagious, momentarily overshadowing the lingering awkwardness due to my brother's strange behavior. We played for a while until Susan finally came upstairs, as it was time for him to go to bed. Despite his protests, she took the tablet away from him and told him he'd have it the next day. She put him to bed, and we both left his room. I asked Susan if I could keep the tablet so I could continue playing and practicing on it, as mine was a little slow. Susan hesitated and then, with a faint smile, handed the tablet to me. "Sure, just make sure I have it back tomorrow morning," she said. Tablet in hand, I retreated to my room, determined to learn the ins and outs of the game before the next round with my nephew. I was busy playing when a text message notification suddenly appeared at the top. I couldn't help but look. It was from someone named Chad saying, "Miss you already." I immediately froze in the middle of the game as the words sank in. I couldn't comprehend what I had just read. Why would my 11-year-old nephew be receiving messages like this from someone named Chad in the middle of the night? I immediately checked the Messages tab and quickly realized that the tablet was connected to Susan's iCloud account. That's when it hit me. She must have synced her iPhone with this tablet, so the messages arriving on her phone also appeared here. She must have forgotten to log out of her iCloud account on this tablet before giving it to my nephew today. Confusion flashed across my face as I tried to figure out why I was receiving this kind of message. I opened the messaging app with bated breath and clicked on Chad's message. My mouth dropped open in shock as I skimmed through the message and discovered a series of intimate conversations between Susan and Chad. I clicked on the contact photo and was shocked to realize he was my brother's neighbor. I had met him a few times when I had visited my brother's house in the past. They were supposed to be just neighbors, but clearly their relationship had crossed dangerous boundaries. Her messages were filled with details of all their encounters and plans. They had discussed Susan's relationship with my brother in detail, where she revealed that she no longer loved my brother, but didn't want to be the one to blame for their relationship falling apart. She mentioned how much she hated the fact that David didn't give her attention because of his job, and that she was happy to receive it from Chad. Chad, in turn, wrote about how much he loved being her neighbor, so he could visit her whenever he could. His text messages were so graphic and disgusting to read that I wanted to throw up in disgust. I couldn't believe I had stumbled upon my sister-in-law's secret affair. It was a shock, the kind that makes your heart race and makes your mind struggle to process the reality unfolding before you. I just didn't understand what to do, and I wondered if my brother even suspected Susan was having an affair. My mind raced, and I started taking pictures on my phone of all her text messages. My hand was shaking, and I worried that Susan might bang on my bedroom door at any moment, demanding her tablet back. I didn't want my nephew to see these kinds of messages while he was playing. He might be a kid, but he wasn't stupid. If he discovered these messages, it wouldn't take him long to figure out the truth, just like it did for me. I didn't want my nephew to find out about any of this because he was too young to go through anything like this. After gathering all the evidence, I unlinked and wiped the tablet, knowing that Susan's phone would also have all those messages. All night, I tossed and turned, unable to sleep. At 3 in the morning, when I went downstairs to get some water, I saw my brother sitting alone in the living room watching television. I got some ice cream from the refrigerator and asked if he wanted a bowl. He nodded, and I sat down next to him, handing him the bowl. The glow of the television flickered in the room while an awkward silence hung in the air. I told him I would always be there for him, and that he could talk to me about anything that was worrying him. Eventually, he spoke, sharing how stressed he was at work. But I could sense there was more to it. I hesitated, but decided to take a leap of faith and address the elephant in the room. "Is everything okay between you and Susan?" I asked, trying not to sound accusatory. His eyes flickered with a mixture of surprise and vulnerability. After a brief pause, he sighed and confessed that he'd been feeling distant from Susan lately. I remained silent as he continued to explain that he didn't have time to spend with his family when he struggled to work 2 jobs every day. I was shocked to hear this as he revealed that he had taken on an additional job to maintain his lifestyle and pay the mortgage on time each month. I continued to listen to my brother as he talked about his marriage and said they were probably going through a rough patch. At this point, I desperately wanted to reveal what I had just discovered about Susan, but I wasn't sure, listening to her struggles, how he would take it. The weight of the truth was oppressing me, but I also didn't want to ruin my brother's marriage without confronting Susan first. "You have to understand that my brother is 6 years older than me, and I was afraid that he might not believe me despite the evidence, or that Susan might manipulate him by convincing him that I was wrong. I needed to be absolutely certain that Susan was being unfaithful. The next day, I offered to take her to a relaxing spa day, which Susan immediately accepted. We had a lot of fun, and then I took her to lunch. While we were eating, I decided to cautiously ask her about Chad. Upon hearing his name, Susan immediately froze in the middle of eating and looked at me. I didn't want her playing games with me, so I was transparent and told her I had seen all of his messages. I told her there was no reason for her to deny it, as I had all the evidence and just wanted her confirmation. To my surprise, Susan started yelling at me about how this was her personal life and that I shouldn't have invaded her privacy by checking her messages. I backed off and let her know that I didn't invade anyone's space. Chad's message simply appeared while I was playing on my nephew's tablet. I told her how inappropriate her messages with him were, and that she should never have given the tablet to my nephew without checking the device first. Susan's eyes widened and asked me if I'd cleaned the tablet, and I nodded. She seemed relieved, probably thinking that I no longer had proof, and told me I should learn to mind my own business. She started threatening that if I ever told my brother about this, she'd ruin my life. I stared at her blankly, knowing she could do absolutely nothing to me. Her words began to infuriate me, and I asked her why she was trying to defend herself. She then tried to justify herself, telling me that she deserved to have fun once in a while, and that Chad made her feel better about herself. Hearing the lack of remorse in her voice, I firmly told Susan that she needed to come clean to my brother, because this didn't feel right to me. She began to yell at me again aggressively, but I quickly interrupted her. I got up from my seat and asked her to find her way home on her own. I didn't want to be around her after seeing her strange behavior. Susan continued to yell at me as I left her there and drove off. When I got home, my mom, who was waiting for us in the living room, asked me if I had had a good day with Susan. I gave her a small nod, trying not to arouse suspicion, and quickly headed to my room. I needed time to think. After the way Susan had just behaved toward me, this was totally atypical for her. Or maybe she had always been this nasty and had kept this side of her well hidden until now. The wheels turned in my head as I went over our conversation word by word. Her threats didn't affect me, and I knew my brother and nephew needed to be protected from her. They deserved to know the truth about this woman. I decided to give her a few days toe talk to my brother on her own. Hopefully, she would open up and confess. If she didn't by his birthday in 4 days, then I would tell him. I watched and waited for Susan to talk to David every time they spent time together. I hoped she would do the right thing and tell him everything, but unfortunately, true to her character, she never confessed and pretended we never had this conversation. If I was ever alone with my brother, Susan would interrupt us for no apparent reason, perhaps afraid I would say something. I also noticed she was receiving frequent texts throughout the day, and from the way she smiled, I knew it was from Chad, which meant she was still in contact with him despite my warning. I know how much my brother loves her and how hard he works to support the family. Therefore, watching her continue to cheat on him despite me respectfully asking her to stop and confess was a stab in my heart. With her birthday coming up the next day, I knew I had to expose her. My brother and she would be flying out that afternoon after celebrating her birthday, so if there was ever a good time to talk to my brother, it needed to be before they came home on her birthday. Susan was extra cheerful. It was as if she was celebrating finally being able to get away from me and thinking she had successfully scared me off. Little did she know what I had planned for her that day. My mother had lovingly prepared a large meal for the birthday girl. We had invited a couple of our close family members and friends to join us for the celebration. Susan loves being the center of attention and seemed to be having fun throughout the day. When it was time to open the gifts, she excitedly sat with everyone to examine them. I watched with a smile as she went through them one by one, soaking up all the attention and clearly enjoying being the center of attention. When she got to my gift, her curiosity was evident. It was a sizable package, and with excitement, she unwrapped it to find a photo album inside. The album began with a picture of her from her college days at the top. She smiled and asked if I had gathered her childhood photos in this album, her eyes sparkling with anticipation of a sentimental collection of family memories. I smiled politely at her, knowing that very soon her smile would turn into a frown. She thought she could act sweet and innocent in front of everyone, but boy was she wrong. The moment she opened the album, her face was met with an A4-sized photo of her and Chad. She continued flipping through the pages to see multiple screenshots of her messages with Chad. My mother and brother, who were sitting on either side of her, leaned in to read the contents. My mother immediately gasped, realizing what it was, and my brother wore a confused expression. Suzanne hurriedly tried to close the album, but my brother was quick. He snatched the album from her hands and stood up to flip through the pages. By this point, everyone knew something was wrong, and glances were exchanged. My dad, sensing something strange, asked aloud if there was a problem, and we watched as Suzanne's face turned pale, realizing she could no longer run from the truth. Her angry gaze met mine, but I maintained eye contact, conveying through my gaze that I wasn't going to back down. I had carefully considered this action, even if it seemed extreme. She was the one who chose infidelity, and it was time for her to face the consequences. After carefully flipping through the pages, my brother looked directly at me and asked if it was all true. I nodded in agreement. Suzanne started sputtering excuses, but the damage was done. My brother looked as if he had been hit with a block of reality. Without uttering a word, he had dropped the truth bomb, leaving the room in stunned silence. My brother then took Suzanne's phone from her, probably to investigate further. My parents, who were now going through the album, looked visibly stressed. My mother asked me how I had found out about all this, and that's when I spilled the beans. I told them I stumbled across it by accident while using my nephew's tablet, which was actually Suzanne's. She forgot to log out of her account, so I saw all her messages with Chad and took screenshots. I went on to explain that I confronted her about it the next day, asking her to be honest with my brother, but she flatly refused. Instead, she tried to threaten me, so I was forced to reveal her affair this way. My brother, after discovering evidence of Suzanne's chats with Chad on her phone and hearing my side of the story, stormed off, probably needing time to process everything. My dad, who had remained silent throughout the entire mess, finally spoke up and asked Suzanne to leave our house. Suzanne, caught in her own web, tried to make up weak excuses, but no one was willing to listen. My dad firmly told her that what she had done was unforgivable, and that she should have told my brother about it instead of forcing me to expose her this way. It was a glorious meltdown to watch Suzanne be exposed and turn red with embarrassment. She began to cry and ran upstairs in shame. Since the incident, my brother has not returned home with Suzanne. My nephew is staying with us, and my brother has asked Suzanne to give him space, despite her begging him to return. My parents have spoken more with me about it and fully understand why I had to expose her this way. However, when I discussed the matter with my grandmother afterward, she expressed her disapproval. According to her, I shouldn't have disrupted my brother's marriage by revealing Suzanne's secret. Given my deep admiration and love for my grandmother, her perspective has left me reflecting on whether what I did was right. So, Reddit, am I wrong for exposing my sister-in-law's affair when she didn't reveal anything to my brother? Update 1. Thank you all for your honest opinions. While some think I was wrong, I'm glad to see that others seem to agree with what I did. I'd like to clarify once again that I would never have done this if Suzanne had decided to speak to my brother herself. That's why I confronted her before revealing the truth on his birthday. I wish I had been a better person, and had broken the news to him instead of trying to threaten me. As for my brother, he and I sat down to discuss everything in more detail. It was heartbreaking to watch my brother break down in front of me as he told me he had no idea his wife had been doing all of this behind his back. He questioned whether this had happened because he couldn't give her enough attention due to his 2 jobs. My heart went out to my brother, knowing how hard he worked to support his family. I told him Suzanne's actions had nothing to do with him. He had always been an exemplary husband and father, and if Suzanne couldn't appreciate that, then I didn't deserve to be with him. Despite my attempts to comfort him, my brother remains deeply affected by the situation, constantly reviewing the photo album containing all of Suzanne Conchid's messages. I'm not sure when I plan to talk to Suzanne about it. I've decided to take a few more days off work, considering working at my parents' business to support my brother and help care for my nephew during this challenging time. Update 2. For the past few days, Suzanne has been sending me messages that have slowly escalated into increasingly absurd threats. She continues to blame me for revealing her secret to my brother and the rest of the family, without acknowledging any responsibility for having been unfaithful to my brother in the first place. At first, I ignored it because I understood why she was angry with me, but over time, her messages became increasingly graphic, threatening to physically harm me for what I did to her. Her messages became so vile that I was forced to show them to my parents. Today, my mom and dad immediately got angry when they read her threats. They urged me to show these messages to my brother. I hesitated, knowing he was already dealing with a lot and felt bad about the whole situation. However, when he saw what Susan had been sending me, he immediately took on the role of protective older brother. He assured me he would handle the situation and told me to block her immediately. He promised he wouldn't bother me anymore and made it clear he would take care of his behavior. It's been a priority for me to spend more time with my nephew lately. With my brother and him set to fly back home in a couple of days, I want to make the most of our time together. Although my nephew senses something isn't right because Susan isn't around, being a child, he easily gets absorbed in his games and toys. For the sake of my adorable nephew, I hope everything turns out all right. Following my brother's advice, I've blocked Susan, so hopefully she won't be able to contact me with her threats anymore. I'm focused on creating a more positive and comforting environment for my nephew during these uncertain times. Update 3. It's been 4 months since my last update, and I recognize that it's been quite a while before I provide the final installment of the story. A lot has happened since my last update, and I wanted to take some time to process everything. After my brother and nephew returned home, he confronted Susan about the situation. However, she continued to deny everything despite the clear evidence we had. Frustrated and determined to get the truth out, my brother decided to have a direct conversation with Chad. In this conversation, Chad confessed everything, revealing that Susan had expressed her love for him, and he reciprocated those feelings. According to Chad, they were romantically involved for over a year. This new revelation led to a heated and intense confrontation between David and Susan. Later, when my brother told us about his conversation with Chad, we were devastated for him. My dad urged my brother that it was time to decide the fate of his marriage. My mom agreed and told my brother that no matter what he decided, we would all be by his side. I also reminded him to keep my nephew's best interests in mind, as it was unhealthy for a child to be exposed to so much toxicity. 2 months later, David made the difficult decision to file for separation from Susan. The constant fighting had taken a toll on their relationship, and he realized there was nothing left to salvage. Unable to forgive Susan for her actions, and with Susan unwilling to face her mistakes, it became clear that the best option was to go their separate ways. As the legal process was still ongoing, Susan was forced to move out of David's house. The weight of his actions had serious consequences, and he faced the reality of losing his marriage. Despite the challenges, my family has remained united in support of David and my nephew. David's emotional toll is visible, but he continues to demonstrate strength and resilience, determined to provide a stable environment for his son, Daniel. Reflecting on the entire experience, I firmly believe that revealing Susan's affair was necessary for my brother's well-being and the protection of my nephew. The truth brought clarity and allowed my brother to realize he was being deceived by Susan. He supported my decision, and I will continue to support my brother as much as I can on his journey to healing.